We are glad that you all folks are joining us. I am John. I work at Contract Diagnostics, and this is Rob. He works at Marit Health, and I'll just do a quick introduction of myself and allow him to do one of himself, and then we'll jump in. We have a lot of ground to cover. I think we could do a full whatever a 6 series masterclass on this topic, an hour and a half a piece, but we won't take that much time today. But I'm John. Again, I work at Contract Diagnostics, and I started this company 14 years ago to help physicians, and it's been a blast. 14 years later, we've helped 18,000, almost 20,000 physicians. We've educated 20,000 physicians plus in settings like this and in other ways. And we just have a blast helping physicians understand their contracts and, of course, helping them analyze their compensation. And if and when is appropriate, having conversations with the employer to gain raises, to change contract terms, to set expectations or clarifications. And it's just been a blast. And a much younger company, Marit Health, kind of has a much similar goal as far as helping clinicians in a little bit different way. Rob, do you want to set the frame for what Marit Health is
Yeah.
all about?
Yeah. So I'm Rob Anderson. I'm the physician co-founder of Merit and actually a full-time anesthesiologist in Richmond. I've been practicing for 20 years. I'm very much in the trenches like everyone else here. I am working nights now to be able to grow Merit a little bit more. So I'm very much in the trenches. And I want to take a second just to say thank you to all you for jumping on. The holidays can be a kind of stressful, busy time for medicine. So thanks for taking an hour out of your day. We are going to go straight into the agenda. Today, we're going to walk through a very practical guide on how to negotiate a raise without changing jobs, which we've broken into 4 key steps. It really starts with knowing whether you're fairly paid. That means benchmarking your compensation against the market and understanding which sources you should trust. And of course, we're going to talk about merit data as well as MGMA. We'll also talk about how to interpret salary data and which numbers actually matter. Then we'll dig into how you construct your story. The story and the narrative that you present to leadership really matter. And John has been helping clinicians for 14 years. He's going to walk us through how to frame your value in a way that actually resonates with leadership and your organization. We'll also talk about timing. When to bring this up can be just as important as how you bring it up. There's moments when leadership is potentially more open to negotiation that you can capitalize on. So we'll talk about how to time the conversations to maximize your likelihood of success. And lastly, we are going to close by talking about how to have the conversation itself. In medicine, we've been so conditioned to not ask for more our whole career. So these conversations aren't always easy for us. So John is going to discuss some strategies that will not just help you get the confidence to have the conversation, but to succeed in the conversation. And before we go any further, one more thing. I want to say thank you for all the people that submitted questions for us. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, but we tried to introduce some of them into the presentation. Okay. The first thing we're going to talk about is benchmarking. So we're going to pull up Merit. Merit is the community-powered anonymous salary benchmarking tool that now has more than 18,000 salaries from real physicians. So yes, we have averages just like you're accustomed to seeing on other sites, but more importantly, we share individual anonymized salaries of your peers. So averages are okay, but they never really tell the whole story. These anonymous salaries, on the other hand, are much more personal. And so they really get into the story of the workload, the setting, the hours behind the compensation. So you can try at least to compare apples to apples as much as possible. Well, we felt like the easiest way to see some of the merit data and get familiar with it was to go through a couple examples with John interpreting some salary panes. So we're going to click on a couple. John, this is one here. In a quick snapshot, give us a rundown about this cardiologist salary.
Let me expand my screen real quick and capture this. So yeah, I think there's, and then of course we'll go into the merit data, and then we can look at kind of some other data sets and how some of the data is unique and different on the merit side. But I look at this one, and one of the things that I love about the merit data is it asks if the physician is happy or sad, and how happy or sad or dissatisfied or satisfied they are with their compensation. Because you could make a lot of money um, and be dissatisfied with it, or maybe you're paid not very fair. And you could be very happy with it, right? So job satisfaction matters, and it's one of those things that Rob will talk about, or we can talk about when we talk about other data sets out there. It doesn't measure these things; it simply measures how much you're making. So right off the bat, you can see in red this physician's dissatisfied, very dissatisfied with his or her compensation. You look at a cardiologist and what a typical cardiologist makes, and it's on the lower side. But then you look at their experience, and they've been in the market for 16 to 20 years. So they've been around for a while. They're not a new grad starting a position. They've been in the role quite some time. If you look at their schedule looks fairly good, but they're averaging 70 hours in a week. And if you look at the clinical setup, it looks like more like an academic setup. And you can see kind of they're in a, where was it? I think I saw their employer type, government,
Mhm.
hospital, health system. So I don't know if they're working partly with like the VA, and they have a layover with one of the academic centers. I'm not sure. But when I see that they're working 70 hours a week and 60% is supposed to be clinical, I see 40, 42 hours as clinical duties. And so first thing I'm thinking about is if this physician's, maybe a little overwhelmed with the schedule. And I know it talks about dissatisfied with their total compensation, but it doesn't say dissatisfied with their schedule. So maybe they're okay with the 70 hours. But this is one of those examples where I think a conversation is definitely warranted. Number one, it's in the 25th percentile. It's low for cardiologists, especially somebody in the market for this long. And on top of that, it doesn't appear to be a bonus potential for working all these additional hours. And I don't know if there's any layovers for, pay for the teaching or pay for the research or pay for any of the leadership roles that they're having there in the facility. And this is one of those when I look at and I see, we always talk about the time for money equation. And I see, the compensation is low on the lower end for a physician, a cardiology in general. And then I look at the amount of work responsibilities and the duties, and it seems to be significantly on the high side, especially for somebody who seems to be flat pay. Now, if you have bonus potential and you're creating a lot of RVUs, then maybe it makes sense that you're working 70 hours a week. But for somebody who seems to be a flat salary, this is one of those physicians that I would highly encourage some type of discussion with the employer. Yes, around the compensation, but also around the schedule and the pace of work, because that might be something that they could find time to adjust and tweak as well.
Yeah, I always get interested. I always get a little piqued interest when I see very dissatisfied because there's a story there, and you have to dig into the numbers. And we'll go to the next one. The next one that we pulled, just a simple family medicine physician in Florida, and we can go in. You can go into a little bit of the breakdown there and what that looks like to you. First impressions.
On this one,
Yep.
I look at 260, and I think it looks like a fairly reasonable starting salary for a family medicine physician. But then I noticed that they've been out for 6 to 10 years. I do look at their structure. I see significant portion is a base salary of 240, and then there's bonuses, but they're not paid. It does say 10,000 for an other bonus. I'm not quite sure if that's an RVU bonus or what it's tied to, but $10,000 is a quality bonus. So I look at this one, and they seem to be okay with their compensation. Most family medicine physicians that we would see in the market would be earning north of 260, 6 to 10 years into their position. So this is one where, again, I agree with you that I think the story matters, and I'd like to know a little bit more about what's their pace of work, what's that other $10,000 bonus for, and again, they're still in the 25th percentile in terms of pay. What can we do to kind of step that through? And this may be a great example of somebody who sat in a position for 6 years or 7 years, and they started with a salary of 240 and a $10,000 quality bonus, and they haven't moved from there. So this, and we've got some other stories. We can talk case studies later if we have time, but this might be a perfect physician to raise their hand and to go in and to talk about increasing their compensation, even if they're okay with it, because maybe they're okay with the pace of work, but there could still be some movement from the employer.
Yeah, another data source that is highly referenced is MGMA data. Uh, this is the kind of data that's often spoken of but rarely seen, and what your organization, especially the larger organizations, use to set benchmarks. This data is typically behind a paywall, right? So it could cost up to $800 to see it, but with Merit, in our commitment to salary transparency, we have licensed it, and we are giving salary or specialty specific snapshots to our users at no cost right now. We'll show you where on the page, but ultimately, John, MGMA, it's kind of this thing that everyone talks about. Everyone wants to see.
Ah, the gold
But
standard.
yeah, it's been the gold standard for a long time. Definitely a legacy benchmark, but there's definitely pros and cons in terms of how the data is captured and what it delivers. Pluses and minuses. Can you go into some of that and what you're experiencing with you've seen this data roll out every year and you do a deep dive every year, so you know exactly what you're talking about in this.
Yeah, I mean, MGMA is, you ask anybody in the industry, what's the gold standard for benchmarking compensation? And MGMA is the first thing that comes to people's mind. And they have been around for a long time, and they do a fantastic job. Last year, they surveyed almost a quarter million. So, in terms of data set size, they do have a significant portion. But remember, there's, of those who they could survey, 1.3, 1.35 million, they're still only able to capture, 226,000. So it's hard to get this data. One of the great things about the Merit data is that you guys have the clinicians, kind of crowdsourcing it, and it tends to be more real time. MGMA, it's not the physicians entering it in, it's only the participants from the healthcare side. So it's the healthcare facilities that are entering in the total compensation. So maybe their salary, which also includes other things depending on how it's set up. One of the things that is challenged with MGMA is depending on how you look at the data. So again, just because it's MGMA, quote unquote, doesn't mean that it's maybe as specific to the physician. So you might look at an MGMA data set for an interventional cardiologist in Western California, or Southern California. And it's if they're using, they could use the national data set, they could use the regional data set, but the region includes California, it includes Wyoming and Alaska and Arizona and Hawaii. And obviously San Mateo is going to be much different than Billings, Montana. And so, but the data might look very similar. So finding those regional or even micro regions can still be a little bit maybe less specific to the individual physician in the use case. One of the other challenging portions of MGMA is just the fact that it's delayed. So right now it's December 4th of 2025. We're almost into 2026. I can't believe it. And the latest and greatest MGMA data is the 2025 data, which is based on the 2024 survey year. The next 2026 data set will be out in April, May, or June, depending on where you fall. And that data set, will be based on 2025. So there's that lag that's a little bit challenging when using MGMA as a benchmarking tool. And of course, the employers and everybody is aware, but it takes a long time to get data and to properly have it inputted, to properly clean it, to properly, analyze it, of course, to package it and then to distribute it. It takes time, and you guys know that. That's one of the other digs, if you will, on MGMA data is it just takes a long time. And we could go on and on about the digs or the benefits, but it still typically is looked at as the gold standard. And it's nice that Merit's offering this to some of their users.
Yeah, ultimately, one of the things I hear about from other clinicians is you have this old data that you talked about that is used to set future contracts well into the future that march out and auto renew. So you're using old data that's going to set contracts that could be in effect for 5 more years. And
Yeah.
that just seems crazy. So obviously that seems like somewhat of a weakness. The one other thing that I've heard from our users is that merit data tends to skew a little higher. Um,
Mm,
Maybe it's
agreed.
because it's in real time. I think some of it is because of the bias in terms of who our users are. MGMA is really entered by employers and large employers in general. And I think they skew towards these big health systems and big employers, missing sometimes the private practices that tend to be sometimes very, very profitable with higher compensation. So there's a difference in how the data is collected that might account for that. Can you speak to that? Is that something
Uh,
that you would?
yeah, I mean, I do. I think with everything, there's the folks that are MGMA. There's I don't know how they select their users in terms of inputs. If they just make it available to everybody and select people choose or choose not to participate. Do you know, Rob?
I think that the people that participate are the large employers, and ultimately
Yeah.
they end up getting access to the information. So it's largely considered by employers for employers,
Yeah.
and sometimes leaving the clinicians out. Right, the clinicians have to pay $800 for just a one
Yeah.
snapshot. So
Especially at the private practice level, which you tend to earn more than other situations, they might not have the time or might not be offered the ability to participate, even though they have a private practice section. But yeah, I do think that user bias does matter, and I think that people who are interested in some of the merit data are the ones that are more proactive. So maybe they are earning a little bit higher. They're out there seeking these tools and these resources, which I think speaks to why they're being paid need to be higher, which I think is all the more reason to help spread the word for Merit Health and increasing that data size.
yeah, ultimately what we're trying to do is get people to data sets, right? So
Yeah.
Merit is real time and current, right? And then MGMA a little older, but still the legacy benchmark. Now, if you create an account, you get two at absolutely no cost. And so it's
Yeah.
perfect. What we're
Yeah.
trying to do is bring seller transparency. If we could bring more data sets, we would definitely.
Yeah. Well, and at Contract Diagnostics, we have our live database as well. And the interesting thing from ours is there is no selection bias, right? There are people who care about their contracts and the data is coming live from the contract. So we know exactly what they're being paid. It's not, I mean, a physician could, um, maybe they don't understand their pay in total. They're kind of just roughly estimating. Where in their contracts, we're seeing exactly their base salary is 300 and their RVU structure is $64.72. Where the physician themselves might just say, I don't know, it's $60 or $65, or I'm somewhere in the 3.5 range. And so the 18,000 physicians that we've worked with over time, we've got fantastic, great data on their contracts, which is 100% accurate. And it's not a user bias because, of course, people who are taking academic jobs at 120 grand or they're taking CTS jobs making seven figures, they all kind of come to us for contract evaluation. So having, I think, a good triangulation approach, I think, is something that's super important as physicians are looking at, how am I paid fairly and should or do I move forward with asking for select items?
Yeah. So the numbers are definitely important. We all know that you have to come with numbers if you're going to do something, but it's not enough on its own, right? So what's your guidance on how to incorporate this data into a story that actually lands with administrators that they get, that they might move on?
I think it's a good question because I say all the time, it's if I'm a patient and I go get my labs and it says my cholesterol is 100 and my bad cholesterol, my LDL is 125. Is that good or is that bad? And I say, well, it matters, right? The story, it matters. If I smoke, if I have diabetes, if my BMI is appropriate or not, if I'm 35 years old or if I'm 85 years old, if I've got family history, and I could go on and on and on. All those things matter on is my LDL at 125 appropriate or not. And so the story really, really matters with that. And it really matters with the physician as well. And I think taking that first step and being proactive is the most important thing. Understanding what your market is, I think keeping an eye on the job market, always perusing great job boards, always figuring out what's out there, what's being offered, I think is a fantastic step to keep yourself, engaged and figure out what the options are. If nothing else, you kind of know what the market's doing around you. If you don't want to move, you can kind of see who's hiring and who's not in your local market. So maybe people are expanding or marketing their services better. I do think preparing the compensation story is a really important piece. And that starts with getting that baseline. So where are you? Do you understand your pay? One of the items that I want to make sure everyone is able to get is if you are, even if you're not paid on, some kind of metric like an RVU or a collection, I think it's really important that you have transparency in those numbers with your employer. So we always want to have, where's my baseline? What's my production? How many hours am I putting in? And really do a true full evaluation of those things. And I think looking at the entire story on not just what you're doing, but the market. Is the market expanding? Are competitors growing? Have you had any changes in other FTEs in the department? And if so, how can we, analyze those and bring those in? Maybe you're a surgeon and you took extra call while your partner was away on maternity leave, or maybe a couple people have left the program and you stepped up so they didn't have to hire locums. I think putting a delineated thing of all the items that you've done and taking time to do so. One of those things that we do at Contract Diagnostics with our CompRx package is help people put those things and package them together for delivery to the employer. But I think taking time to, number one, again, baseline the salary. Number two, figure out all the wonderful things that you've done, and then take the time to package that and then go to the employer in a respectful way and find ways to bridge the gap, if you will.
Yeah, it's nice that you mentioned the jobs because ultimately the quickest way sometimes to higher salary is to change jobs. It's not always that easy in medicine, right? But
Mhm.
as many of you know, at Merit, we do have a job board. It's the largest job in medicine. So we do have salaries listed. Obviously, not every job posting has a salary range, but many do. And so it's nice to toggle back between salaries and jobs, and you can actually figure that out. I actually had a conversation with an anesthesiologist today who was looking for a comp adjustment, and we were talking through different things. And ultimately, his story is he's paid well below MGMA, and it's clear, but they don't have any problems hiring, and they haven't had any turnover. So there's really no incentive for the employer to actually make a move. So even though his numbers were lower, the story isn't there for him to actually get the employer, which happens to be a big private equity backed company, to actually move on that. So it was
Are
interesting.
they? Yeah, it is. So he's paid below. Do they pay all the anesthesiologists the same, or is
Yep.
each one paid differently?
Everyone's the same.
Everyone's the same.
Everyone's the
So if
same.
he's paid low, then I safe to assume everyone else is paid low
Yeah.
as well.
Yep, everyone's paid low, but no one's leaving, and so they don't have any holes, and so really there's no driver to increase compensation because they're not struggling to staff. So which is
Yeah,
rare in the anesthesia
yeah.
space.
Again, every situation is very different, but this might be one of those situations where I would talk with them and we would see if a group discussion, a group negotiation might make sense. Sometimes they won't listen to Dr. Rob or
Mhm.
somebody else, but if the entire department comes up and the entire department wants to talk about it and they know that they're underpaid and the data shows that they're underpaid and a great argument can be made for why there should be an update, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, I think they might listen. So maybe, yeah, if Rob leaves, if John leaves, maybe it's okay to hire one here or two there. But if the entire department has a problem, I think they might be more apt to listen. So
Yeah.
that would be one of those positions where I would encourage a group discussion and see if that's something that they'd like to move forward on. But depending on if there's 42 or 50, anesthesiologists and a couple of cardiac guys, getting everyone on the same page can be very challenging in that situation.
Yeah, yeah. One of the questions that got submitted earlier actually had to do with productivity. I'm going to read it. Basically, he was asking when you're productivity based and you're looking for a raise, but you feel like your schedule is already maxed out. So clinic is booked full and productivity increases don't seem very feasible. How do you approach that? I mean, do you have to come with other stuff, more value, more leadership, more? How do you get a raise in that instance where you're kind of maxed out in what you can give?
And the physician's paid on a salary model or are they paid on a
Productivity,
they're paid
productivity.
on productivity.
Yep.
Okay. I think if they're if they're doing everything that they can, and I guess I would still want to benchmark their productivity. So if they're maxed out on their schedule, everything is full, nothing else can change, they're doing an excellent job. I would want to make sure that they're paid in that 90th, 95th percentile. And if
Mhm.
not, then maybe there's an issue with some of the coding on the back end or some of the charges or the way that the organization is capturing our views. We do see some organizations not capturing them correctly. And we actually take quite a few calls from physicians saying, my numbers just can't be right because my clinic's full and I'm working so much and I've got all these things going on and I'm not producing the numbers that I should be. So I think that might be one place to start, just to make sure that all that hard work that they're doing is being captured right and that the reports are being delivered and they're accurate. That'd be number one. And number two, I don't know again how they're paid. There might be some efficiencies that they can iron out. If they are paid on an RVU schedule, they could ask for a raise in the conversion factor. They could ask
Mhm.
for a tiering model on how they're paid. So maybe if they're a family physician and they're paid $42 an RVU, maybe, and they're paid from zero, maybe they want to ask for a tiering model. Maybe if they are in that 90th percentile and they're producing, but their RVUs haven't changed, or maybe they're producing in the 90th, but they're earning in the 75th or the 50th percentile. Again, a big reason for change, right? I'm earning and delivering 90% to you guys, and yet you're delivering the 75th or the 72nd percent to me. So there's a mismatch there. I think if we can identify those mismatches in productivity based on the workload and the effort, I think then we can have a great conversation. How that happens can be created in multiple different ways, from increasing the conversion factor to tiering our view structures to implementing a quality bonus to asking for a retention bonus. Maybe you're a leader in the program and maxed out, and they don't want to increase the pay for you, but they do value you. And so maybe you ask for some kind of leadership role and they pay you $3,000 a month for that for dedicated hours. Maybe there's just a
Mhm.
retention bonus. They give you $40,000 to sign you to a 2-year extension. Maybe there's a bend schedule in the schedule that we could put together. Again, there's so many different things that you could do with an individual physician based on his or her story that I think is good. But yeah, I mean, somebody tends to be maxed out and capped out based on the comp plan in place. I'd want to make sure that the comp plan is a fair one, and then of course I'd want to analyze the numbers and make sure that the employer's capturing them right. Those would be my first two steps.
Yeah. So it seems like there's lots of things that you can look at. And so that's optimistic that there's a lot of pathways that you can navigate to hopefully get to some higher number.
Yeah, we like to call them levers. I like to say when
Yeah.
people call us and they use our compensation RX product, where for under $300, we just go through their compensation and we give them ideas. We give them ideas. They come out of
Mhm.
these calls or 30 minutes long with us analyzing the data, but also they come out with 12 or 15 different ideas. So, one idea isn't, might be ask for a higher base salary, but that's not the only idea. If they say no to that one, we've got 14 other things that we can bring up and creative solutions to reach to a mutual agreement on what's best for both parties. So yeah, I think having lots and lots of options based on the individual story, which of course can't be told just by looking at the data on an MGMA sheet or the data on a merit slide. It's the story that really matters, and that's what is really important, I think, to evaluate the total situation.
Yeah. Since you were talking about the percentiles, this is a question that I'm going to jump forward. I was going to save this for later, but someone asked a specific question. I was told I'm getting paid 50th percentile of MGMA.
Mhm.
We hear that a lot, right? For my specialty, and they wouldn't go any higher. Is that unreasonable? And, to my take on that is I honestly don't know many doctors that feel like they're average, right? So should they be shooting for a higher percentile, or is 50th percentile actually legitimate?
The individual physician themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Should they be shooting for higher than 50th percentile? Or, I mean,
Yeah, I
so
think again,
often we
I
hear
think it
that.
depends on. I think it depends on many, many factors. If the employer is saying we can't pay you more than the 50th percentile, I don't think that that's correct. But again, I think it depends much on the setup. I mean, if you are um, I mean, if you're a cardiologist taking Q2 call, the STEMI call, or you're a cardiologist taking STEMI call once a month or twice a month in a large group in a big academic setting because the fellows are doing it. I think that matters, right? If you can't be more than the median, I think the schedule, the work hours that you guys capture, I think is important as well. Um, but I think, yeah, I would definitely assume that a physician, I think shooting for the median to start is a good place. A lot of employers will look at, how do I put people in and around the median? Maybe slightly under, slightly over, depending on the situation. Some hard to recruit areas might shoot for a little bit higher. Some, easy to recruit areas might shoot for a little bit lower. And I think there's good rationale behind that. But then I think as you transition your career over time, your second year, your fourth year, your seventh year, as your practice matures, like that last physician that we were talking about, and your production goes up, um, whether it's if they're not even measuring production, I mean, over the years, I would hope that your RVUs or your collections would go up. And of course, over those years, your value to the organization increases. So as your RVUs go up through the 75th and the 90th percentile, your compensation should align and follow that as well. If it doesn't, I would say that's a problem. And even if you start at the median and you commit to 3, 4, 5 years with the program, your value has increased significantly, even if there's no bonus potential or they're not bonusing you at all. And I do think that those are conversations that should be have to bring you up off the median because you're worth more than the median to the organization.
It's honestly a perfect segue into getting the timing right. So the timing is important, right? So most of us, and I can speak for myself, but I think a majority of us are on self-renewing contracts.
Mhm.
And honestly, employers are incentivized to keep us on that, right? So we have to go to them to try to move the needle on this. And so there's got to be times that are better than others. What would you say is the best time to try to renegotiate and the worst time to try to bring this up?
Oh my. Um, so I mean, I would say the best time. There's so many great times to do this. I think earlier is better than too late. If you're in a role and you're looking at when do I ask for a change. We've seen a lot of press lately around mergers and acquisitions, and I think if they're issuing you, maybe they're going to roll you over at whole and that nothing's going to change. We're going to let you guys just go ahead and run. Fantastic. But I do think that's a great time to discuss compensation if it hasn't changed in a while. Anytime they offer you an amendment or an addendum or a change is a great time to discuss. Oftentimes, an employer will just send you, here's your update. Go ahead and sign it and send it back. And a physician might do so without thinking twice. Um, Even if it's just like a 2% raise. So sometimes an employer will just automatically give you a raise, 2%, 3%. And which is fantastic. And they maybe sign something, maybe they don't. The physician maybe says, thank you so much. All those interactions around compensation and contracts are great times to dig back in and have a conversation. 2% raise, you didn't even ask for it. That's wonderful. But maybe the market moved 3.8% that year. So you're still falling behind and your token 2% raise isn't getting you where you should be. So I think anything that the employer is coming to you with changes or amendments or anything is a great time. If they're not, I think every 2 years, every 3 years is perfect to raise your hand and say, let's talk. Talk about compensation, yes, of course, but also just talk about your performance. We like to look at these conversations as parties coming together with mutual interest, right? Assuming you want to stay there, they want to keep you there, they are enjoying you in the community, you love providing care to patients, and the goals are the same. So it's how do we have a conversation on what's your performance been like? So not just about money, but how am I doing overall? What could I do better? What things could I improve? What are your goals coming up? And then, of course, tying that into what your goals are in terms of increasing compensation or change to the schedule or adding a new piece of equipment or whatever it is. But I think the timing every 2 or 3 years makes sense. Employers are famous for dragging these out. So we're actually onboarding a group in January whose contract ends December of 26. And they've called us and they've said this always takes us 18 months or a year minimum. And we want to bring contract diagnostics on so it's a much more smooth process. It's not going to take a year because what they do is they delay us and then they delay us and they delay us and it's very, very frustrating. So I would say um, when you start the process, um, don't let them delay you. Make sure that you keep the process moving in a timely fashion.
Yeah, do you work with a bunch of groups or is it primarily individuals? Because it seems like these conversations happen, and case in point, anesthesia, we're all paid the same, right? So
Yeah.
they say, "Oh, I can't move up on you because Jimmy, we would have to move up on Jimmy too." So how does that work? What do you see in that regard? Is it easier to negotiate as a group, or is it better to
It is.
go
Yeah.
on your own?
It depends on the situation, but we launched a group negotiation division year and a half ago, maybe. Just pretty much out of need because, as we've worked with 18,000 physicians and we've seen changes over the 14 years. And, one of the changes, you have a lot of health systems and yeah, they do want to go to more of a model where they pay people similar or same or in bands or in different structures than individually negotiating with each individual physician. And so if that's the case, which you can't control the way the organization looks at compensation and the philosophy they have around how they pay their physicians or their departments or their groups, then a group discussion, a group negotiation might make the most sense. It could be anything from, 3 to 4 surgeons to 42 to 60 cardiologists. The smaller the group, 3, 4 surgeons in a community hospital, 12 oncologists in a regional setting, those tend to be the most successful when you get, 40, 42, 50, 60 people. It can be challenging to get everybody on the same page. Not impossible, but challenging. And we do feel like when Dr. Rob raises his hand and say, I'm not paid enough. Well, Dr. Rob, that's our model, and we'll reevaluate it at the appropriate time. But when 42 of you guys raise your hand and say, it's been 3 years, 4 years since we've had a change, we have all the data, we think it should go up, we'd like to engage in a conversation. I think that hits a different weight with the employer. I also think it hits a little bit differently when you bring in a firm like Contract Diagnostics. I think they take it a little more seriously, and they can't use some of the words that they can get away with, such as we can't pay you more, fair market value and compliance and everything, because the analytics that we can do and the tools that we have access to, and just frankly the lingo that we know the employers can use is much different than maybe an individual physician or the group can do on their own. So we always encourage getting a third party involved when going about whether it's just you or whether it's the entire group as well.
Hey,
That's
John, quick comment here. There's a few questions in the live Q&A. I don't know if you guys can see
I
it,
can't
but
see them. No, I can't see them.
okay.
Let me pull them up.
Do you want me to read off a couple of them?
sure.
I don't see them. I just see your questions. Maybe I got the wrong one pulled up. I'm in the chat.
Click on Q&A. Or I can read one of the questions
Yeah, I think
here.
we just turn them off. I don't see them.
Okay, so the question is, if an organization bases your total compensation on your prior year's RVUs and your base salary represents 90% of that amount, and the remaining 10% is based on certain metrics which are not the easiest to fully reach, how do you get them to give you 100% of your productivity as opposed to 90%?
So if I understand the question correctly, they're paid 90% of what they've earned the prior year, and then 10% is withheld based on metrics. I would have a conversation on what the metrics are. I don't know if they're group metrics or individual physician metrics. But if 10% of your pay, which is a significant amount, is being withheld because you're not meeting select metrics that might be challenging and difficult to meet, I think having a discussion around what those metrics are is super important. I don't know how often they change, if they're unilaterally set by the organization or mutually set by the physician themselves or at a department level. If they're individual based, Dr. A had these inputs on the metrics, or if they're group based and how much they're able to control them. So, if one of them is the profitability of the organization, the physicians, they have a say in that, if you will, based on their work, but they don't get to control many things of the profitability of organizations. So I do think that whatever those metrics are should definitely be discussed. And then, I'd love to look under the hood and check out that compensation model more. But if it's the metrics that's holding everyone back, I think it's a discussion on the appropriateness of the metrics.
One of the other questions here, I just saw this and it's relevant, is if you're interviewing to change jobs due to low compensation and earned bonus was not paid out, how should you ask for a sign-on bonus? Now, my experience is that, at least in the anesthesia space, salaries aren't really that negotiable when you have in the offer letter stage. These add-ons, whether it be relocation, sign-on bonus, vacations, all that stuff, can be negotiated some wiggle room without changing everyone else's compensation. So, what is your stance on that? And have you seen success with asking for some of those extras more so than asking for a compensation adjustment?
Absolutely. especially in the anesthesia space. Again, it depends so much if you're the 26th hospitalist or the 42nd anesthesia physician coming in, or if you're the only pediatric endocrinologist in a giant market area that's been needing one for 3 years, right? Or you're a cardiothoracic surgeon with a fantastic track record of starting 4 programs from scratch, and you're going in to start your fifth. I think those have different stories on what's really negotiable and what's really not. But if the perception is, and again, I would always lead in with a bunch of questions around compensation before I ask anything about can I have more. I'd want to know how they set it and their philosophy and what metrics they use and the last time it changed. So, at Contract Diagnostics, we give them a lot of questions to ask before they even ask for anything different in the compensation model, because understanding the organization's philosophy around compensation is really important as we're going to address, can I have more or should I even ask for more? But if we find out that the compensation for the base salary is non-negotiable, you take it or we'll offer it to somebody else, we don't care, then yes, I do think that we can get creative. And creative could mean maybe additional funding for CME. It could be additional signing dollars. It could be signing dollars in addition to retention dollars. Maybe there's an extra stipend for relocation. Again, if you're relocating and you're an established physician, you have more things than a new grad, so your relocation might be higher. Maybe there's a different way that we could discuss benefits or the time off policy. There might be other benefits that we could discuss depending on how the contract's structured. But if the salary is not going to change, which of course I do think, even if it can't change, I can think of 35 questions that we can ask them on compensation, right? Even if, look, Rob, don't ask me anything around compensation, it's not going to change. I can still think of a lot of questions to ask just to seek to understand the model a little bit more and then what may happen in the next few years with me and the rest of my group. But then I would shift my discussion to some of the ancillary sign-on bonus, retention bonuses, increased relocation amounts, modified slightly the vacation time or the schedule and the inputs that you're going to put in. Maybe if you're going to take extra call, how much is that extra call taken? Or if you're volunteering for certain things, admin time might be something on the books, or nurse practitioner supervision, or some kind of layover assistant or resources. I think those are things that could also come up to be a topic of discussion.
So many of us in medicine are really not, we've been kind of trained to be almost submissive in a lot of ways and not push for more. And so this is not a natural conversation, not an easy conversation for many of us. Is it best to have some conversations? Is it best to lead with email? Is it best to lead in person? Is it best to get Contract Diagnostics involved early before any of that happens? What's the most successful in your eyes?
Yeah, it's every physician out there, makes good money, right?
Mhm.
And I always say, a lot of money is different than being paid fairly or appropriately or good, maybe as it may be. And I use the example, if Patrick Mahomes, we're based in Kansas City, of course, and if Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback for the Chiefs, was paid $5 or $10 million a year to play football, that's a lot of money, But I think everything would say he's underpaid, even though $10 million to play football is an awful lot of money. He's underpaid. And I think, understanding what your actual value is and what's, where you fall, I think is super important. But when you're going to have these conversations, I think, again, it depends. If you're taking a new job and you're starting the conversations, we think, interviewing, not talking about money is a good thing. So if they're asking you, what are you making now, or what do you expect to get for an offer? We think just something generic. I'm sure that your offer will be competitive with the others that I'm seeing, or I'm sure that your offer will be market competitive as I evaluate where I'm taking, my career. Let them come, let them anchor, and then figure it out. I don't want you to anchor on a lower price. You could ask the questions, right? I'm sure that you offer something very competitive. Typically, do you use a data set like MGMA? Do you have external consultants? Do you pay every physician the same? How do you structure compensation? Maybe turn it back to them, but don't give them a number. I want to be paid $350. And I think if you're in a job and you're looking at, how does this start? I think just whether you're interviewing or whether you're in a job, I think you realize that you guys have the same common goals, right? Assuming you want the job and they want you there, whether it's you want to sign the job or you want to stay there. Understand that you guys have mutual goals. And I like to think it's not me versus you. It's not I win and you lose or vice versa. It's how do we come together to find ways to get through some of the challenges in front of us. And I do think that, and if you're working, whether you're working there or if you're a physician that's looking at a job, I think an email, again, if you're a physician working there, an email saying, hey, thank you for the contract. I've had everything looked at. Can we set a time to discuss, right? Then they know that you're interested. You've had someone look at the contract. They know you have questions because you had someone look at the contract. And of course, you want to talk with them in detail. Have a great conversation. Have everything lined out. Be very purposeful with how you go about it. Like you said, you guys aren't trained to do this. We talked to military physicians actually, and they're like, "I'm just trained to follow orders." And then I get this, and it's way different, So I think every situation is different. But yeah, for the most part, you guys don't go through training on how to push back and negotiate. And I think coming very purposefully, having a plan in place is important, and then having that conversation live or on the phone if it may be, and then emailing them afterwards, right? Thank you so much for your time. We discussed A and you said B. We discussed C and you said D. Please let me know if I've missed anything in our discussion, or let me know when you've updated the terms of the agreement. If you're working somewhere, I think, those annual reviews, right? Anytime they're adjusting compensation is great to say, when can we sit down and spend some time discussing my numbers, including my production, including, the future of the clinic, and including my compensation. And then sit down, and I like to not just jump right into compensation. Don't make it all about compensation. Make it about those common goals, right? You guys have the same goals. I think it makes a lot of sense when you sit down and you ask them what their goals are, right? What's their vision for the department in the next couple of years? Figure out what they want to do and then find out how you can align your goals to help them meet theirs. And that's when I think you can really make progress with your current organization if there's a discussion. And again, it doesn't have to be all about compensation. We encourage people to bring up that new ultrasound machine. We encourage people to bring up, the excess call burden because they haven't been able to hire for 2 years. Why? Maybe the compensation is low and nobody's looking at taking the job because the comp package doesn't look good. I think all those things should be on the table, not just more money, a bigger salary, a higher conversion factor, but maybe you want more time off. Maybe you need that nurse practitioner. Maybe you need that scribe. Maybe somebody in the OR needs extra training because you're starting late on time and it's dinging your scores, right? So I think all those things should be discussed at the appropriate time during these conversations.
You're mentioning all the levers that you can pull, all these creative things that you can do. One of the questions was, if you're a new resident coming out, obviously you have the opportunity to go and explore multiple jobs in multiple locations and may end up with multiple offers. Is it easy to be successful leveraging those offers, or is that does that get complicated?
Yeah, no, I think it's an amazing thing to do. I think the most complicated item there, Rob, it's the timing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people appreciate the timing that's involved. So we'll get phone calls from people and, they may say, I have an offer letter, but I have 3 more coming, right? And first thing I do is I tell them to set expectations with the employers on timing, because the last thing you want is an offer letter or a contract, and they say, we've got 10 candidates. You've got 2 weeks to let us know, out of respect to the other 11. And I think if your next interview is in 10 days or 14 days, then we've got a problem, right? Because how do I know if I want this job? Because I haven't been on the next site visit, the next interview, and I don't know when their contract's going to come in. So timing everything can be super, super challenging, which we can help people with. But timing can be very challenging from a clinician's perspective, not plus with everything else going on, keeping track of timelines is challenging. But I think I always encourage everybody to get multiple offers. I think interviewing is a skill and doing site visits is a skill, and it's not a skill or a muscle that people use very often. So I encourage everyone to exercise that muscle and go do practice site visits and, see and try it out, because it's definitely a skill. And I would encourage people to do a lot of site visits and then obtain as many offers as you can. Just number one, it's good practice. Number two, I think those offers can help you offset. We just worked with a physician is going into a private practice. The salary of 400 was pretty on par with where we expected it to be. There was zero signing bonus, zero signing bonus. And the way the practice was set up, I wasn't surprised that there wasn't a signing bonus. But she had an offer from somebody else with the exact same salary and 100 grand signing bonus. But I'm looking at this thinking the numbers look okay. And based on the organization setup, I would expect a signing bonus. However, having that other one that said 100 grand was impactful. And we went from 0 to 75 grand on a signing bonus right away with a small little ask. So had she not had that other offer with the 100 grand, we may have just said, look, I'm not surprised it's a 0. I mean, if it's 0, it's hard to ask for 100 when you're starting at 0. So maybe we should ask for something reasonable like 25, right? Let's not piss them off. But because we had that other offer, we were able to, without even asking for 100, we say, look, I've got this other offer. It's 100. What do you think? Well, we can get to 75 overnight. So that's a great success on why it matters to have those extra offers, because you might need to pull that out at the right time.
We are running out of time, but I want to try to at least get one more question. One of the attendees says, do you have any advice or insight for comparing competing offers or opportunities if they are W-2 versus 1099? Now, I am sure you see this a lot, right? Because honestly, as a resident, you just don't know what 1099 and W-2 means. I mean, it's just not in our wheelhouse. And so there's a lot of hidden things in a W-2. There's a lot of benefits that add up to real value. But it's hard to really compare apples and oranges, right? So the 1099 W-2. Can Contract Diagnostics help with that? Or at least
Absolutely we can. Yeah, we're well versed in the nuances and the differences between contracted positions and W-2 positions. It's really, really important that the contract lines up and the job and the compensation and everything lines up with what an independent contractor is. The last thing anybody wants to do is be misclassified by the IRS and have back fines and penalties for taxes and for misclassification. And generally those contracts will roll those issues, any fees, fines, penalties, litigation. The organization will indemnify itself and they'll roll right to the physician. So it's super important that these contracts are reviewed and understood by the physician before they sign them, regardless of the compensation. Now, at a quick and dirty answer would be, we would expect compensation to be higher by 12 to 15%. Obviously, as a 1099 contractor, you likely aren't going to be obtaining benefits. There are certain taxes that you'll have to pay extra on. You need extra maintenance. You need to be more organized. If you think you're going to keep receipts and think you're going to set up an S corp and think you're going to have all these great deductions, that's fantastic. And those things can all work well to your advantage if you're organized and you have a good team put together in terms of the back end, software or CPAs. But yeah, we see a lot of benefits to those working as 1099 contractors. We've seen a lot of physicians want to do that. We have a lot of people, they call us their W-2s and they want to switch to being a contractor because they read an article that the taxes are better, and which again may or may not be the case. So it's important to educate yourself on these big differences between being a W-2 and being an independent contractor, either through your group or just doing a bunch of different locums gigs, or having a couple of different 1099 contracted positions. But we do see it's a big benefit, and typically 12 to 15% is what we would want, at least in additional compensation to make up for the lost benefits. But again, benefits can be humongous. I mean, paid time off, health insurance, dedicated dollars for CME, retirement plans, matching contributions, cash balance plans, profit sharing plans, pension plans. We worked with the cardiology group a while back, and the salary seemed low, but we did the negotiation for the physician. And upon asking a lot of questions around the benefits, we realized that they offered a traditional pension plan, and they just had a physician leave, I think after like 6 years, and he took 600 or 700 grand into that pension plan after a few short years. Another physician took 2.4 million out after 17 years, I think it was. And so that's one of those benefits with the lower salary that might not be, put in the MGMA data or the Marit Health data, that, yeah, they're going to have $2.5 million on, after 10 or 15 years of working there because of this fantastic benefit. And that's not something you're going to make up at a 12% extra clip per year as an independent contractor. So benefits really, really do matter, and we think it is important to analyze all of them. One last thing on this, Rob, as I know that we're trending on time. Um, just because you have benefits and just because you have health insurance doesn't mean that it's a good plan. We see plans and contracts all the time saying you'll be provided health insurance and it's covered by the organization. Other times we'll see plans, you'll have health insurance and you can select from one of our plans. And we dig into the plans, and the plans are $1,700 a month. So if you're not planning on a $1,700 spend per month and you think the compensation's good, again, deep dive into the benefits because they can really move the needle in terms of the total comp package.
Great.
There is.
Well, I think we can wrap it up. Ultimately, I would like to plug Merit a little bit one last time. Obviously,
Yeah.
Merit has 18,000 salaries. We have MGMA now. We have jobs. We are your one-stop shop for salary transparency and jobs in medicine. So check it out. Please share with your friends and colleagues because that's how the data set grows and gets better and more actionable with time, right? So this is how we can take over for some of these legacy benchmarks like MGMA and really provide clear salary transparency for medicine. And John, you've obviously shared through this what contract diagnostics can do, way more than probably I anticipated. Go ahead and drop a pitch.
Yeah, no, I think, I encourage everyone, if you haven't been over to merithealth.com, go ahead and check that out. It's a fantastic resource. Tell all of your friends to go check it out. The more people that put put their information in a anonymous fashion, of course, the more powerful that database becomes. And they've got lots of fantastic tools over on that website that people can use to evaluate their compensation or to look at other options or to figure out, what the next steps could be. And then when it comes to what do you do with all that, of course, our compensation analysis package is fantastic. So next steps to that 10% raise where we started this conversation tonight, what's the next steps? It's get the data, right? Hop onto Merit Health and grab the data, arm yourself with information. Get the contract diagnostics compensation package. There's a $50 discount, so it's not even $250 by doing this. You get a 30-minute call and much more data to help you craft that story. And when it comes to how do I get a 10% raise, the first step is doing some homework. Then it becomes raising your hand with the employer, and then we can lead you through what the steps look like after that. So there's a couple of QR codes here. One to visit Merit Health. Please open a window with that and visit them. Download their app. It's fantastic. And then, of course, the compensation that we offer at Contract Diagnostics is a great investment to help you move the needle in terms of that 10% raise. And I think together, the data really shines, and we can help you obtain that information. Then, if it's something you feel you need to look for another job because they're unwilling to negotiate, of course, Merit Health can help with that database as well with their new job board. So, at the end of the day, we appreciate everybody joining. Rob, anything else to add? This was fun. I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, I would love to. We are going to be sending this out in a video, and we will try our best to answer all the questions that we did not get to in the chat. So we will send those out in video or send those directly to the user.
Yeah, and follow us on social media, Instagram and the Facebook platforms. I don't know that we do TikTok. I don't know what Merit does, but definitely follow us because these questions we'll be answering them one-on-one there. We'll be answering them through emails. You'll get a copy of the recording, like Rob said, and a couple of other value adds. And I know in the chat, I know there was some things posted as far as some links and downloads that you guys can make as well. So we had a blast, and we appreciate your time this evening. And Rob, great to see you as always,
Great.
and I hope we can do this again soon.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
Thanks, guys.